I pulled into my driveway with a paper bag full of tamales and 2 bottles of Rioja, planning on spending the rest of the afternoon staining cedar beams and listening to Coltrane. Instead, I found a banner, an actual vinyl banner, strung across the stage of my private outdoor amphitheater that read, "HOA welcomes, Summer with July Jams, first show this Saturday." There were rows of folding chairs already set up, plus a rack of floodlights zip-tied to the adobe columns, and because, of course, someone had rigged up a power strip straight from my back patio. I didn't scream. I just stood there with my tamales cooling in one hand and the wine threatening to slip from the other, trying to process what the hell I was looking at. My backyard, the same one I'd spent the last 6 months restoring with a mix of sweat, savings, and sentimental guilt, had been hijacked by what looked like the ghost of a failed Coachella pop-up. And I swear to you, it wasn't even the sight of all those chairs that set me off. It was the fact that the stage lights were tilted off-center. Now, I'm not a violent man. I left that behind when I aged out of off-Broadway set design and started letting my knees make my life decisions. But something about seeing my uncle's hand-laid stone steps, freshly cracked to make room for a cable run, made me want to find whoever was in charge and staple gun their HOA newsletter to their forehead. Instead, I just whispered, "You've got to be kidding me," and backed slowly into my house like I was retreating from a bear. So, yeah, I guess a little background might help before we get to the part where I almost rented a smoke machine out of spite. The house, my house now, technically, used to belong to my uncle, Nando Mendoza. Real name Fernando, but don't ever call him that unless you wanted a 10-minute lecture about fascist-sounding syllables and the sacred rhythm of stage names. He was different. Built the place himself back in the 40s, back when you could still buy 5 acres of desert land for the price of a toaster and a handshake. It's adobe, but not in that magazine spread spa retreat way. I'm talking real adobe. Hand-packed bricks, timber beams blackened with age, and these beautiful irregular curves in the walls that make everything feel like it was sculpted instead of built. The man had no money, no blueprints, and zero regard for zoning laws, but he did have an eye for drama. And the centerpiece? The amphitheater, right in the backyard, tucked between mesquite trees and half-buried sandstone boulders with a little stage platform and semicircle seating carved into the slope. Stand center stage, whisper, and someone in the back row will hear you clear as day. That place, it's where I saw my first play, where I had my first kiss, where my uncle taught me how to rig a lighting cue with 2 extension cords and a coffee can full of gel paper. So when he passed 2 years ago and left the place to me, I didn't hesitate. I'd already been phasing out of my career back east. 42 is ancient in stage design unless you're filthy rich or teach at Juilliard, and I was ready for a slower pace, a house to restore, a garden to unkill, a backyard stage to maybe, someday, bring back to life. When I moved in, the place was rough. Nando hadn't been able to keep up with it those last few years. The plaster was cracked in spots. The outdoor wiring was a disaster, and the amphitheater looked like it hadn't seen a broom since Bush was president, the first one. But I didn't care. It was mine. It was his. And no HOA, no matter how passive-aggressively landscaped, had any jurisdiction over it. Or so I thought. Nando had always been crystal clear. The reason he bought that exact plot was because it wasn't part of any planned development. He hated HOAs, called them suburban gulags with seasonal wreath policies. He made sure the property stayed unincorporated even when the neighborhood started creeping in from all sides. The line was the line, or again, so I thought. What I didn't realize was that after a county rezoning merger a few years back, the line moved. Not a lot, just enough. One little legislative hiccup, and suddenly my land, which had always been outside the reach of the Willows HOA, was now on some sketchy map inside their extended governance zone. Whatever the hell that means. Nobody told me, not the realtor, not the county clerk, not the chirpy woman who gave me a welcome basket full of lavender soap and a pamphlet titled "Community Harmony Starts With You." At the time, I just figured it was an overeager neighbor. Turns out it was the opening move in a much bigger, much dumber war. The first red flag didn't look like a red flag, it looked like a flyer. Glossy, tri-folded, and wedged under my doormat like a passive-aggressive burrito. Community safety and beautification. Notice, action required. At first, I thought it was just junk mail. I almost recycled it with the pizza coupons. But then I saw my name printed, my name, on the little tear-off slip at the bottom, along with the phrase non-compliant structure. Identified outdoor performance zone. Performance zone. Jesus. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a government-looking document tell you your backyard is non-compliant, but it does something weird to your blood pressure. I took it inside, sat down at the counter, and read the whole thing 3 times. Apparently, the structure, my uncle's amphitheater, violated shared use expectations for undeveloped community assets under the HOA's special zoning overlay for cultural use parcels, which, translated from legalese, meant, "We think your amphitheater is a shared park now." I stared at it for a solid minute, just blinking. Then I flipped it over and saw they'd included a suggested compliance path, which involved submitting a use calendar, obtaining group use permits, and, this was my favorite, ensuring ADA-accessible seating options for anticipated community gatherings. Anticipated by who, exactly? Because I sure as hell wasn't anticipating anyone but me, a couple rabbits, and maybe an old friend or two with a ukulele. I figured it had to be a mistake, bureaucratic mix-up, so I called the number at the bottom and got passed through to a woman named Cheryl who sounded like she smiled even when she was typing angry emails. She asked for my address, paused for a beat, and then chirped, "Oh, right, that's the amphitheater parcel. You should have received your welcome packet weeks ago." I told her as politely as I could that I didn't want a welcome packet, or shared use, or any of this. I explained that the amphitheater was private property, historic actually, and that there must have been a boundary error somewhere, and Cheryl, bless her heart, said, "Well, if there was, you'll need to bring that up at the next Planning Harmony Subcommittee meeting. We meet every other Wednesday at the Rec Center." That was the first time I heard the phrase Planning Harmony Subcommittee, and I almost hung up out of sheer emotional fatigue. But I didn't. Instead, I told her very clearly that no one, not her, not the HOA, not whatever whimsical committee names they came up with, had the right to access or use my land. She said she'd make a note. 3 days later, I came home from the hardware store to find 2 men in neon vests walking around my backyard taking pictures. No note, no phone call, just 2 dudes with clipboards, a measuring wheel, and one of those little rolling carts landscapers use to mark sprinkler heads. When I asked what the hell they were doing, one of them, mid-40s, looked like he moisturized with paint thinner, told me they were evaluating the safety of the seating infrastructure for upcoming summer use. "Infrastructure?" I said. "Yep," he nodded. "Looks like it needs leveling. Some cracks in those front steps could be a liability issue if the HOA opens this up for public access." That's when I lost it. I didn't yell, but I did get very close to his clipboard and asked if he had a signed work order or legal notice to be on my land. He looked at me like I was the crazy one. "We were told this was common ground, sir." "By who?" I asked. He didn't answer. They both just left, muttering something about escalating the report. I stood there, in my backyard, surrounded by busted pavers and the ghosts of half-finished lighting rigs, thinking, okay, so this isn't just a mix-up anymore, this is a slow-motion land grab dressed up in friendliness and formatting. They weren't asking for permission. They were assuming they already had it. And somewhere behind that assumption was someone pulling strings, someone who wanted this place for something bigger. Things got real weird, real fast after that. About a week later, I was in the middle of rewiring some path lights when I heard music coming from the back of the property. Not like someone's Bluetooth speaker, I mean actual amplified sound. Guitar, drums, even vocals. It sounded like a band warming up for a show. I followed the noise and came around the corner just in time to see a group of 20-somethings setting up on the amphitheater stage. One guy had his shirt off and was adjusting a mic stand like he was about to headline Coachella. Another was tuning a bass while chain-smoking and complaining about the dry heat. They had coolers, a merch table, and a guy in a GoPro rig doing what I can only assume was behind-the-scenes content. And standing dead center, clipboard in hand, was her. Barbara Clennon. Blonde bob, pink linen blazer, tortoiseshell sunglasses that cost more than my truck. She looked like someone who hosted HOA meetings and sold essential oils in bulk. I hadn't met her before, but the way she was directing everything like a Hollywood producer told me all I needed to know. I marched up to her, not aggressive, just visibly unamused. "Hi, can I help you not be here?" She gave me a tight-lipped smile. "Oh, Mr. Mendoza, lovely to finally meet you in person. I'm Barbara, president of the Willows HOA. We're just doing a brief sound check for Saturday's concert." I stared at her. "Sound check? For what?" "The kickoff to our summer art series," she said, like I was the one who'd missed the memo. "Your amphitheater was selected as the venue. It's just perfect. Rustic, artistic, acoustically fascinating. Really aligns with the cultural goals of the community." I blinked, twice. "You selected my property." "Yes," she said, as if that clarified anything. "It's part of the extended cultural use zone now. We posted the event info on the community calendar last month." "Which calendar?" "The HOA site." I just stared at her. I hadn't checked that website once since moving in. I thought it was just lawn height guidelines and barbecue complaints, not, apparently, illegal concert bookings. I took a breath. Barbara, I didn't approve any of this. This is private property. You can't just schedule events here. Her smile froze. Actually, according to our records, your property was designated a shared cultural resource last fiscal year. It's all in the Heritage Use Overlay Map. I almost laughed. The what now? She handed me a laminated document. I flipped through it. It was full of jargon, community arts initiative, regional engagement, venue optimization zones. And sure enough, there was a highlighted parcel on a poorly scanned map, right where my house sat. I pointed at it. That's me? You drew a circle around me. She nodded cheerfully. Yes, and just so you know, Saturday's concert will be very tasteful. No alcohol, family friendly. My son's band is headlining. They're very talented. Sort of an indie folk post-punk fusion. We'll be wrapped by 9. I swear I saw actual sparkles in her eyes when she said fusion. I told her no, flat out, that none of this was legal, I hadn't signed anything, and if they didn't leave, I'd start calling the sheriff. She tilted her head. Oh, I don't think that's necessary. Let's not be combative, Zachary. She said my name like it was an accusation. You seem like a smart, reasonable man. I'm sure you don't want to cause friction with your neighbors. This is about unity, harmony. You mean your son's band? Her smile faltered just a fraction. Excuse me? This isn't about community enrichment. This is about getting your kid a venue. Barbara stepped in close. Not touching me, but enough that I could smell her perfume, citrus and condescension. You should be careful with accusations like that, she said softly. People around here talk, they form opinions. I'd hate to see you become difficult. And then she walked off like we'd just shared a lovely brunch and not a hostile territorial standoff. The next morning, I found a handwritten note taped to my front door that said, "Unwelcoming behavior reflects poorly on our community spirit." No signature, no explanation, just that. But the real punch in the gut came 2 days later when I discovered that someone, no idea who, had taken it upon themselves to fix part of the amphitheater seating. One of the old sandstone steps had been replaced with poured concrete, just dumped right in there. No matching, no shaping, no consideration. It looked like someone had sneezed gray sludge onto a sculpture. That step? My uncle carved it by hand in 1962. I know because he signed the underside. I found it during restoration. I felt something break a little inside me when I saw it ruined, like they hadn't just trespassed, they'd vandalized. And in that moment, I stopped giving anyone the benefit of the doubt. This wasn't ignorance. This wasn't enthusiasm gone rogue. This was invasion. I gave it a week, one full week where I didn't go full scorched earth. No angry emails, no Facebook rants, no retaliatory leaf blower symphonies at 6 a.m. Just patience, me trying to be civil in the face of civil sabotage. First thing I did was drive down to the county assessor's office. Took me 25 minutes to find parking, 15 to get someone who actually knew what a parcel map was, and another 40 to explain that no, I wasn't trying to build a casino in my backyard. I just wanted to know who the hell thought it was okay to draw HOA borders around my house without telling me. Turns out it all traced back to a zoning adjustment from 2 years ago. Some bureaucratic shell game where a few streets got reassigned to District 12 Suburban Overlay, which meant the HOA had jurisdiction if the property was voluntarily annexed. Voluntarily, that was the key word. I'd never signed anything. Neither had my uncle. I double-checked with the records clerk, a guy named Ron, who looked like he hadn't blinked since the Clinton administration. He confirmed it. No annexation forms, no signatures on file. My property wasn't legally under HOA control, which at that point should have been the end of it. So I printed every relevant document I could get my hands on and scheduled a meeting with the Willows HOA office. I figured, okay, they've made a mistake. Show them the paperwork, have a grown-up conversation, and this whole circus can go away before the second act even starts. The HOA office, by the way, is inside a converted model home with lemon water in the lobby and enough fake plants to smother a rainforest. I checked in at the front desk and was told to wait in the reflection room. It had inspirational posters and a tiny water feature that made me have to pee. Eventually, Barbara Clennon walked in. She didn't say hello, just sat across from me, crossed her legs, and tilted her head like I was an overdue library book. "Mr. Mendoza," she said, "I'm told you have some concerns." That was how she framed it. Concerns. Like I was complaining about noisy wind chimes or a neighbor's decorative gnome and not, the illegal seizure of my backyard. I handed her the printouts, parcel maps, zoning rulings. A copy of the clause that said my land wasn't part of any extended use zone unless someone actually consented to it in writing. She flipped through the pages like they were IKEA instructions. Then she smiled. "I see," she said. "Well, that's certainly your interpretation... I blinked. It's not an interpretation. It's literally the law. Barbara didn't flinch. The HOA operates under its own charter, approved by community vote. When your uncle passed, there was an automatic inclusion clause triggered by the transition of ownership. Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there, I said. That's not how property law works. You can't just wait for someone to die and then declare eminent domain by brochure. She chuckled. Zachary, this really doesn't have to be adversarial. I agree, I said. So take down the banner, cancel the concert, and stop sending people onto my land. She shook her head slowly, like a kindergarten teacher disappointed in a kid who ate glue. We're trying to build a community here, a cultural hub. The amphitheater is a gift, and you're treating it like a burden. I understand that emotions can run high when families pass on legacies, but the greater good? Greater good? I snapped. Barbara, your son's band is literally headlining the next event. This isn't a cultural movement. It's a backyard booking scam with a Facebook page. That hit a nerve. Her eyes went cold. Your attitude is making this much harder than it needs to be, she said. Yeah, well, your concrete vandalism didn't exactly set a friendly tone. Barbara stood up, smoothing her blazer. We've tried being cooperative. If you insist on escalating this further, you'll be leaving us no choice but to pursue formal enforcement. Enforcement of what? I asked, standing too. An imaginary rulebook you printed in Microsoft Publisher? She didn't answer, just smiled that same brittle HOA smile and left the room. A few days later, I got a letter from the HOA attorney, a real one this time. Nicely formatted with phrases like failure to cooperate with designated cultural zone parameters and impeding sanctioned community engagement efforts. It ended with a gentle threat of further legal consequences should non-compliance continue. So that was it. I had tried everything: facts, civility, common sense. They responded with stonewalling, gaslighting, and a completely made-up zoning category. And that's when I knew, if I wanted to protect what mattered, I'd have to stop playing defense. The twist didn't come in the form of some dramatic discovery, no manila envelope with confidential stamped on it, no mystery witness stepping out of the shadows. It came from a shoebox, literally. A dusty cardboard shoebox wedged between old lighting gels and a cracked extension cord in my uncle's workshop. I'd been cleaning. Not for fun, more like stress pacing with purpose. I needed to do something with my hands before I started constructing a moat around my property. So I opened up a storage cabinet I hadn't touched yet and found this old Nike box with prop keys written in Sharpie across the top. Inside, mostly junk. A rusted lock, a broken harmonica, a program from some 1987 production of King Lear. But underneath all of that was a tiny voice recorder, one of those ancient digital ones with the red record button that clicks like a stapler. I almost didn't turn it on. I figured it probably had old stage cues or one of Nando's weird monologues he liked to practice at 2 a.m. But curiosity got me. I popped in some fresh batteries, hit play, and... This is Fernando Mendoza, May 18th, 2020. I want this on record in case anything happens to me because I don't trust Barbara Clennon as far as I can throw one of her damn garden gnomes. I froze. He sounded tired, breathy. This was just a few months before he died, and you could hear it in his voice, raspy like he was recording between coughing fits. He went on. She came by again today, with papers this time, said I should sign this cultural access agreement so they can start using the amphitheater for community events. Told her no, told her hell no, she didn't like that. Got that tight little smile like she does when she thinks she's being clever, said, think carefully about what legacy you want to leave, like it was a threat, maybe it was. Then silence, just static and a faint wheeze like he was thinking. Anyway, I'm not signing a damn thing. I told her in writing and out loud. She can take her little HOA army and choke on a sound permit. I must have stood there for 5 minutes just letting that play on a loop. Because here's the thing, Barbara had claimed, with a straight face, that my uncle had signed a participation agreement with the HOA 6 months before I moved in. Some form supposedly attached to his estate file buried in their heritage archive. I hadn't seen the actual document yet. Their lawyer refused to send a full copy citing privacy protocols even though the man was dead and I was the heir. But now I had proof that it was a lie. He didn't just not sign it, he actively resisted it. Said no in writing, said no on tape, said no with the kind of disgust you only reserve for people who bring potato salad to a dinner party and then ask to keep the leftovers. That moment, it hit me hard. Because all this time I'd been fighting back to protect something I loved. But now I realized I was also defending something my uncle had already fought for. Maybe even knew he wouldn't be around to protect himself. It wasn't just about property anymore, it was about principle, about legacy, about some smug little tyrant trying to rewrite history because she thought no one would check the fine print. I backed up the recording, made 5 copies, and uploaded it to 3 cloud drives just in case Barbara suddenly got into arson. Then I called a lawyer friend from New York, someone who owed me a favor from back when I helped her stage a courtroom scene for an off-Broadway show. She listened to the recording, asked 3 questions, and then said, "Oh, she's screwed." Not, "You've got a shot." Not, "Maybe we can fight this." Just flat out, "She's screwed." And for the first time in weeks, I felt it. Calm. Cold, righteous calm. They thought they were dealing with some artsy transplant with a rickety house and a bad attitude, but they forgot something kind of important. I design stories for a living. I know how to set the stage, and I was about to give Barbara Clennon one hell of a third act. The thing about me is, I don't do rage. Not the loud kind, anyway. I don't throw things. I don't scream into pillows. I don't write all-caps emails at 2 a.m. with 37 exclamation points. What I do is plot, I sit, I sketch, I storyboard. You give me a problem and a few quiet hours, I'll give you a 6-scene solution with lighting cues and a surprise ending. So that's what I did. I sat down at the old drafting table in my uncle's workshop, poured myself a glass of mezcal, and started drawing. First thing I knew, the tape was my ace. No one could spin their way out of that. The tone, the phrasing, the date stamp, it was undeniable. Barbara Clennon had fabricated an agreement after my uncle's death, and I had him, in his own words, calling her out before it even happened. But I wasn't going to blow it all in one angry email. Nah, that's not theater. That's tantrum. What I needed was an event. See, I had a few advantages most people in HOA hell don't have. I know stagecraft, I know timing, and I've spent 2 decades working with actors who can cry on cue and stab you with a monologue. So I started calling in favors. First up, my friend, June. Retired stage manager, currently running a community theater 2 towns over. I told her I needed a crew, nothing fancy, just a few trusted performers, some light gear, and a willingness to participate in a bit of experimental immersive theater outdoors in the desert heat with a very aggressive HOA audience. Her response? Tell me when and how weird. Next, props and set dressing. That's where my friend Liam came in, art director turned children's book illustrator, living off-grid with a shed full of retired museum mannequins. He's the kind of guy who'll build you a fake time machine if you bribe him with red licorice. Then there was the location, which obviously was my backyard, my amphitheater. I figured if they wanted to use it so badly, I'd let them, just once, but on my terms. So I drafted up invitations, clean, elegant, official-looking cards that read, "Special Presentation, a tribute to HOA leadership and cultural legacy." I even put a little HOA logo in the corner, which I copied from their website. Not exact, but close enough to pass at a glance. Then I hand-delivered them to every house within a 3-block radius, not with a smile, just calm, quiet efficiency. I gave one to Barbara's vice president, one to the guy with the rock garden shaped like Texas, even one to Cheryl at the front desk. I mailed one to their lawyer just for fun. Inside the envelope was a polite note. Please join us this Saturday for a special performance recognizing the impact of local governance and community collaboration. Which, if you read it out loud, sounds like theater. But if you read between the lines, it was bait. And Barbara? She took it. I know because she RSVP'd in gold pen, literally signed the card in glittering cursive like she was accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award. I didn't advertise the event online, didn't alert the media. I wanted it to feel intimate, local, neighborhood only, which meant when the bomb dropped, no one would be able to dismiss it as internet drama or some outsider attack. It would happen right in front of their eyes, in their own words, on their own stage, with popcorn. The night before the show, I walked the amphitheater alone. Lights were tested, sound cues were programmed, my actors, community volunteers were prepped. And the tape? That was ready too. It'd play at the end. Projected on the side of my house, big and undeniable. My uncle's voice, clear as day, echoing through the desert, calling her out, exposing everything. This wasn't just a show, it was opening night and closing argument. Saturday evening rolled in hot and still, the kind of desert heat that just sits on you like it's judging your decisions. Perfect for drama. I'd set up the amphitheater like it was hosting a proper community gala. Folding chairs in neat arcs. Decorative string lights hung across the old mesquites. A podium at center stage, flanked by 2 potted plants I borrowed from my neighbor Dale, who still thinks I'm a yoga instructor. and right behind that, a pull-down screen I rigged using an old bedsheet, some wire, and about 40 zip ties. By 6:45 p.m., people started arriving, couples in matching polos, retirees with wine and thermoses. One guy wore a HOA Strong t-shirt, which I'm 80% sure he made himself. And then came the Clennons. Barbara showed up in a full pantsuit, which in Arizona heat is either a power move or a slow suicide. Her husband, Richard, trailed behind her looking like a man who hadn't made a decision since 2007. She walked straight up to me with that exact same smile from the first day we met. You know the one, all teeth, no warmth. "Zachary," she said, "this looks lovely. I knew you'd come around." "Glad you could make it," I said. "You're gonna love the show." She gave me this little squint like she sensed something off but couldn't quite pin it down. Then she turned to greet another neighbor and started holding court, laughing a little too loudly, waving at people like a politician on a small-town parade float. Meanwhile, backstage can stance, and by backstage, I mean my tool shed and the cactus patch, my crew was getting into character. June gave a final rundown, Liam adjusted one of the mannequins, yes, there were mannequins, and I checked the projector like it was a detonator. Everything was set. At exactly 7:15, I stepped onto the stage. Everyone quieted down. There were maybe 60 people in the audience by then, all fanning themselves with the flyers I'd printed on beige cardstock to look official. I tapped the mic. "Good evening, neighbors. Thank you for coming to this very special performance." A polite wave of applause. What you're about to see is a dramatic reenactment, a tribute, if you will, to the power of local governance and the importance of ethical leadership. A few people clapped again. Barbara gave me a proud little nod like she thought I was about to dedicate the show to her. Oh, Barbara. I stepped aside, lights shifted, and then the play began. Scene 1, a reenactment of a fictional HOA meeting. My actors played community leaders wearing over-the-top blazers and using exaggerated bureaucratic jargon. Lines like, "We can't let facts get in the way of aesthetics, Deborah." And, "If we fabricate consent, is it really fake or just pre-approved?" The audience started chuckling. A few people laughed out loud. Barbara looked slightly confused. Then came scene 2, a dramatic monologue by an elderly man sitting in a rocking chair on stage, framed by warm lighting and fake desert wind sounds. The actor read, word for word, my uncle's recorded statement. "This is Fernando Mendoza, May 18th, 2020. I want this on record. I don't trust Barbara Clennon as far as I can throw one of her damn garden gnomes. I'm not signing a damn thing." That's when the room changed. I mean, not the room, technically. We were still outside, but you could feel it. The laughter stopped. The air shifted. People leaned forward in their seats. Barbara stiffened. Her smile froze, then slowly slid off her face. And then, without a word, I dimmed the stage lights and hit play on the projector. The recording. My uncle's voice, the actual tape, now playing through a speaker system I borrowed from a local mariachi band. Told her no. Told her hell no. Said, "Think carefully about what legacy you want to leave." Like it was a threat. I let the whole thing run. Every last second. No commentary, no explanation, just the raw truth echoing out across the same stage she tried to steal. When it ended, I stepped back up to the mic. That recording was made 2 months before my uncle passed. He never signed any agreement, and yet this HOA, under Barbara Clennon's leadership, claimed otherwise. Gasps. Real ones. I held up a printed copy of the fabricated form they'd supposedly gotten him to sign. This document was backdated, forged, used to justify events, trespassing, and unauthorized construction on my land. You could feel the tension crackling now, neighbors whispering, people shaking their heads. One guy even stood up and said, "Wait, is that true?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Barbara did. She stood up, red-faced and trembling. "This is slander," she said. "This entire thing is a setup. He's trying to make me look bad. This is harassment." I calmly looked at her. "Barbara, you RSVP'd, signed it yourself." I held up her gold-penned response like a prop in a courtroom drama. She started to walk toward the stage, sputtering something about legal action, but her husband gently grabbed her arm and whispered something into her ear. I don't know what he said, but it stopped her cold. She sat down. People clapped. Not for me, not for the actors, for the moment, for the truth landing where it needed to. The show wrapped 5 minutes later. The actors took a bow. Someone handed me a cold bottle of water like I'd just climbed Everest. And as the crowd started dispersing, a few neighbors came up to shake my hand. Thank me. Apologize even. One woman whispered, "We always thought something was off, but we didn't know what to say." That night, as I packed up the gear and rolled up cables, Barbara walked past me without a word. No threats, no warnings, just silence. And let me tell you something. It was the sweetest sound I'd heard all summer. By Sunday morning, the whole thing had blown up. Not just around the neighborhood, I'm talking full wildfire. Apparently, someone recorded the entire performance. A neighbor's teenage daughter, I think. She uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "HOA lady gets dragged, live on stage by theater nerd neighbor." Within 24 hours, it had over 200,000 views. By Monday, a local news outlet picked it up under the very professional headline, "Desert Theater Show Exposes Alleged HOA Forgery Scandal." The article quoted my uncle, quoted me, quoted Barbara, or at least her public Facebook posts, which by then had switched from yoga affirmations to damage control at an alarming pace. And once the recording hit social media, everything else just cracked open. People started coming forward, like a lot of people. Turns out I wasn't the only one Barbara had tried to steamroll. One guy said she'd pushed to have his front porch declared non-compliant because he hung a wind chime she didn't like. Another woman claimed the HOA fined her for excessively whimsical lawn art, which turned out to be a single gnome in a cowboy hat. Then came the big one. A former HOA board member emailed me out of the blue, said they'd resigned 6 months ago after learning that Barbara had personally redirected funds from the Cultural Development Grant into something called the Leadership Appreciation Fund, which, according to them, paid for 2 catered luncheons, a website redesign, and, I kid you not, a hot tub for the HOA clubhouse. You ever see people flip on a leader so fast it gives you whiplash? By Tuesday, a full emergency meeting had been called by the remaining board members. It was open to the community, held in the recreation center where they usually teach pickleball to retirees. This time, it was packed wall to wall, standing room only. Neighbors with printouts, angry dads, retired lawyers. One woman brought a freaking binder. Barbara showed up too, still wearing that polished smile like a suit of armor, but she looked different. You could tell she knew. The tide had shifted and it wasn't coming back. She tried to open the meeting like it was business as usual. "We're here today to clarify a few unfortunate misunderstandings." But someone shouted from the back, "Forgery isn't a misunderstanding." The room exploded. People were shouting questions about the concert, about the forged documents, about why the HOA paid $1,200 for decorative signage that looked suspiciously like the one now hanging in Barbara's home office. Someone had screenshots. Yes, screenshots. By the time they got to a vote of no confidence, it wasn't even close. Barbara didn't just lose her title, they scrubbed her name off the HOA website within the hour. Her husband stepped down from the local Chamber of Commerce 2 days later. Quietly, no press release. The board launched a full audit of HOA finances going back 5 years. Subcommittees were dissolved. New members were elected. People with actual accountability and, get this, transparency goals. They even announced they were suspending all heritage cultural use initiatives until a full legal review could be completed. As for the forged agreement? Yeah, that turned into a criminal investigation. My lawyer friend in New York referred me to a local guy, real bulldog type. He took one look at the documents and the audio recording and said, "They're gonna need a bigger shredder." A few weeks later, I was formally interviewed by the county DA's office. Apparently, there was more than enough evidence to investigate Barbara for forgery, falsification of records, and misuse of community funds. And because the HOA had been receiving city grants tied to cultural enrichment, her actions crossed into actual fraud territory. They didn't cuff her in front of anyone, but she lawyered up fast and stopped showing her face in the neighborhood. The last I heard, she and Richard listed their house for sale, motivated seller, and were rumored to be moving somewhere less toxic. Translation, anywhere they hadn't been memed. Oh, and get this. The Willows HOA website now has a giant red banner that says, "Notice, our organization is undergoing leadership transition. Thank you for your patience as we rebuild trust." Rebuild trust. I love that. Because really, all I did was tell the truth. Loudly, with lights and a cue sheet. The real work came from the people who'd been sitting on their hands for years, afraid to speak up. Once the dam cracked, it didn't just break, it flooded. And that's the part I'll remember most. Not just the downfall, the wake-up. The moment a community realized it could tell its own story, and maybe even rewrite the ending. So that was that. Barbara's gone, the amphitheater's mine, and for the first time in months, no one's put anything in my mailbox that wasn't pizza coupons or actual mail. The HOA sent a formal letter a few weeks later, full of lawyer-approved language like overreach, corrective action, and deep appreciation for your engagement. Basically their way of saying, please don't sue us. I didn't need to. The new board came by in person, just 3 regular neighbors who looked both exhausted and deeply relieved that I wasn't setting anything on fire. They offered to remove my property entirely from their records, no more cultural zones, no more visits, no more assumptions. I told them that sounded perfect. Then I handed them a box full of flyers, schedules, and community harmony notices and wished them luck. I kept one thing though, Barbara's original invitation to the July Jams concert, the one with the HOA presents stamp and the little clip art guitar in the corner. I framed it, hung it backstage in the workshop right above the tool bench. Every time I see it, I smile, not because of the chaos it caused, but because it reminds me what happens when people assume silence means permission. The amphitheater's quiet again now. No floodlights, no folding chairs, no indie folk post-punk fusion rehearsals. Just crickets, warm breeze, and sometimes, late at night, me reading old scripts out loud to the stars like my uncle used to. I did end up hosting one performance though. Not for the HOA, not even for the neighborhood. Just a few friends, some borrowed lawn chairs, and a short play I wrote myself. Kind of a dark comedy about a suburban HOA president who tries to seize a man's backyard and ends up running a meditation kiosk in Sedona. Pure fiction, obviously. But it got a standing ovation. Walter from 2 doors down brought cookies. Cheryl from the HOA front desk came too. Turns out she quit after Barbara imploded. Said she just wanted to hear what real community sounded like. After the show, we sat around under the string lights, passing around homemade sangria and laughing about how the whole thing felt like something out of a Netflix miniseries. And at one point, Walter raised his cup and said, "To Uncle Nando, for building something worth fighting for." I couldn't have said it better. So yeah, no bulldozers, no lawsuits, no press tours, just peace and space and a little theater that's finally back in the right hands. Mine. And if the new HOA ever forgets that, well, I've still got the lights, the speakers, and one hell of a script ready for curtain call.